Managers of Reddit, what's the worst thing an employee has done to get themselves fired? So, guy was just hired, he asked to go home on his second day because he crap his pants. Alright, crap happens, a little TMI, but what can you do? He must be an honest soul. He went home for the afternoon, came in on the third day to crap his pants again, and asked to go home. There was no fourth day. Next story. One employee was constantly stealing food from the refrigerator that other employees placed in there for lunch and late work night dinners. Eventually, after weeks of complaint, the IT department set up a hidden camera and eventually caught the woman taking 2 yogurts, a Weight Watchers TV dinner, and a Coke of can in one swoop. Then at another job, a coworker got snippy with the receptionist during an internal phone call. As she clicked the phone, she said, "Effing B-word," but the click did not disconnect the call. The receptionist was still on the line and said, "What did you call me?" HR would later get involved. It was investigated and the coworker was terminated. Next story. Cart associate at Walmart was playing on his phone while using the cart mule to push a large line of carts. He ran over an elderly woman, breaking her leg and hip in the process. Was immediately fired. Not sure what all happened to him legally, but he was out of our store. Next story. Dumbest, but maybe not the worst. A mechanic in my chemical plant wrapped expensive copper tubing around his chest and put his coat over it. It was a really cold day and it started drawing up to where he couldn't breathe. Just as he got to the guard gate, the guards had a good laugh unwinding the soon-to-be unemployed mechanic. Next story. So, have you ever been so touch-starved that you wrapped yourself in expensive copper tubing around your chest and put your coat over it? What? I don't get it. Anyway, I'll give him a hug. Next story. So, when I was a manager in a smaller kennel, 2 of the female employees came independently to say one of the other workers had shown them some very inappropriate images and made a lot of inappropriate comments about the animals. Checked his socials just to see what kind of things he's posting publicly, and it's all the worst furry stuff ever, and sexualizing animals. Also saw some pictures of him with the dogs at work that had some very inappropriate comments alongside them. He didn't work for much longer and lost his crap when I told him we can't allow him to work around animals or give him a reference. Next story. Early 20s kid disappeared for a week to go on a heroin binge. His friends dropped him off in the middle of the day the next week, walking into the office high as balls as if nothing happened. The next day, his dad came in to apologize. He explained what happened, let us know that he was going back to rehab, and he asked if he could continue working afterwards. Next story. I was a newly hired manager at McDonald's. The guy before me was working the cash register. This store was very highly trafficked. It was right off of the interstate, right on the border of city, in the middle of nowhere. It was the first place to stop and get some food for travelers coming in, and the last place to stop at and get some food for travelers leaving out. It was not uncommon to have over $1,000 in under an hour in the cash register, and policy was to drop money in the safe at least once every hour. So this new guy comes in, works for a few hours, but the manager never did the drops. After about 4 hours, the employee goes to the bathroom and disappears. Turns out he left with over $4,000 from the cash register. Police were called because obviously they have the guy's ID, address, and information on file, only to find out that everything was false. He stole someone's ID and socials that looked similar to him and used a fake address. I don't think the police ever found him or figured out who he was. Okay, look, I don't encourage anybody do what that person did, but wow, that's impressive. He got away with it. I don't encourage that though, but holy crap. Anyway, next story. So, first job at insurance. Weird guy wanted to be an SIU, the team that investigates fraud. He got it in his head that rather than investigating external fraud as a part of the claims department, they were a kind of clandestine CIA operation who were listening in on our phone calls, and you could get tapped to join if you were smart enough and hardworking enough. He was fired for sleeping at his desk repeatedly. Next story. Not a manager, but I've been in the restaurant biz for 30 years. Worst I saw was a 40-plus chef hitting on and basically attempting to SA our 16-year-old hostess. I caught him myself. He had her cornered in the dish room with nobody around. Even though he was a full chef and me just a sous and 10 years my senior, I basically kind of fired him. Told him if he didn't leave now of his own free will and never come back, he would be leaving on a stretcher, possibly in a bag. The poor girl was in tears. It's been somewhere around 15 years and it still infuriates me to think about it. As for her, she pressed charges. It was all on camera and he was arrested. Got off light though on a plea, which also infuriates me. Got a couple of months in jail, not even prison, years of probation, situation and didn't even have to register on the sex offenders list, which also infuriates me to this day. He was never a chef anywhere around here ever again, though. We blackballed the F out of him. Ugh, sorry, I just had to get that out. Next story. Left on shift. She was a nurse for what it's worth, so she didn't just leave a store or something. She left her patients unattended and her CNA left with her. And she left to go F her CNA at the dog park across the street. Came back and finished her shift, night shift, posted, "I love having sex on Facebook at 3 a.m. during said shift," which her husband, not the CNA, saw the post, which led to him showing up at the facility threatening staff members. Last I heard about her, she lost her license due to trafficking fentanyl. Next story. I read the post as dumbest instead of worst and started typing this, so I'll finish it out anyway. I managed a call center for a while. One of my staff was a 23-year-old guy who just could not figure out how to get to work on time. He had his own car and only lived like 15 to 20 minutes away, but he would perpetually be up to half an hour late shift after shift. We had a generous tardiness/absence policy, 3 strikes for unexcused absences, but an unexcused tardy was only half a strike. And we were even nice enough to give him just a verbal warning at least 2 or 3 times instead of starting to count them, because the call center wasn't one that had like an inbound call service level. It was just outbound calls, so the time you lost hurt you in other metrics and killed your chances at getting a bonus. But soon enough, he had burned through 5 of the 6 unexcused tardinesses that he was allowed. The last time he was tardy, though, I brought him into my office and told him this was his final written warning. If he was even a minute late clocking in without a legitimate excuse for the next 90 days, he would be terminated on the spot. That was on a Tuesday. On Wednesday, he was scheduled to arrive at 4 p.m. for an evening shift. He walks in at 4:25 p.m. holding a Starbucks cup in hand, and he said, "I couldn't help it. The drive-thru took forever." I took his badge and I walked him out. I hope he learned from it. Next story. I used to run a large food distribution center. The overnight crew was responsible for picking orders for delivery the next day. There was a recovering alcoholic on the night crew who fell off the wagon one night. He snuck out at break and drank a whole 5th of vodka. Once he was back on the clock, he tried to stab another employee for picking the bag of potatoes he wanted for his pallet. A fight ensued and the drunk guy ran outside. We found him blacked out in his car with the doors locked. I was worried he might choke on his vomit, so we called an ambulance. They didn't want to wake him or try to treat him where he had a knife, so we had to wait for the police to show up, break a window, and get him out of the car. Then they took him to the hospital to pump his stomach. Next story. Just a few weeks ago, salesman tells HQ that his very large national customer wants us to use a specific vendor for a multi-million-dollar contract. We set it up, but have procurement run backgrounds on the vendor to make sure they are reliable, no slave or child labor, etc. After digging down many layers, the founding documents for the vendor come back. It's owned by the salesperson and his sister. It was done quietly to save face with the customer, but the salesperson no longer works here. Next story. Had a guy who was a recovering meth head. He had all of the physical tells, but seemed to have his crap sorted out in the interview, so I gave him a chance. He was getting clean so he could get joint custody of his kids. About 6 months, he was an ideal server. Great to customers, never missed an order, anything. Well, court didn't think he did enough, so they gave the baby mama the green light to move out of state and take the kids. Dude showed up to work dripping in sweat, grinding his jaw, everything. I sent him home and said, "You look like you're catching something bad. Don't come back to work this sick again." And I gave him the out. I gave him the single chance and the single excuse. Well, he came into work tweaking a second time, and I sent him home. I had a final paycheck waiting for him when he showed up for his next shift. He was clean that day, but I couldn't risk the health of the rest of my staff or my customers. Met him at the door, told him that there was pay for all of his shift as well as for the rest of the week. He didn't argue it. He just nodded, said thanks for the chance, apologized for effing up, took the check and walked away. Never seen him since. Last I heard he was homeless and on meth. Broke my damned heart. It's always one of the worst terminations I've done because he knew he effed up, but he also didn't have the wherewithal to be sober without doing it for his kids. That's the worst because I knew how great of a dude he was, and I also know how none of it mattered in the end. I've fired other people for drugs, violence, racism, sexism, harassment, theft. You think of it, and in my 2 decades of management, I've probably fired someone for it. I've let go of more people than I can count, but Jesse always sticks out to me as the worst because that dude deserved so much better than he let himself have. Next story. I had a coworker get fired for applying for jobs on a jobs website using her company computer at work after she'd been warned about appropriate internet use and that she was being monitored. Then had a different coworker fired for looking at adult content at work on a work computer, also after being warned about appropriate internet use. Then I had an employee who was the absolute rudest and most incompetent a-hole, but he made it easy by just calling in for 2 weeks straight and refusing to provide a doctor's note. Next story. Got mildly injured by the garage door in the warehouse after effing around. Agreed to go to the hospital after having his supervisor very clearly tell him there would be a drug test and he didn't have to go to the hospital, and that he would be fired if he tested positive on the drug test. Remember, this was a mild injury, like a small scrape, saying this as a coworker who saw it, not a boss trying to downplay. But anyway, guess who got fired? Next story. Hired a manager in his mid-40s from a well-known publicly held auto group. He was fired after a week for asking a newly hired 22-year-old woman if he could sniff coke off of her boobs. He also seemed to talk about his sexual adventures a lot. We think his former employer knew he was a serial sexual harasser and was pleased to dump him onto us. Okay, everybody, so the moral of this story is don't buy Chevy. Look what they do with their employees, dumping them on people. But anyway, next story. So, married plant manager had an affair with an assembly worker who was his granddaughter's age and a mom to 2 very young boys. The girl dated one of the techs who was 12 years older than her and worked at the same plant. The tech found out about the affair and killed her. The company fired the plant manager. Then many forklift operators got fired for accidents while under the influence. Employee hit a car in an employee parking lot and fled the scene and never showed up to work. So I guess they fired themselves, though it would make more sense for them to keep working to pay for the damages. Guy took bereavement leave for his grandpa's funeral in the UK, but instead went partying in Jamaica and someone snitched on him, providing social media posts as proof. Analyst screenshotted message from their boss and instead of forwarding it to his best friend, accidentally sent it to his boss. Boss was named on his phone as, in a polite sense, wiener-sucking C-word in his phone. Then some guy got caught reselling items bought at a sample sale. Professor got forced into early retirement for drinking on the job and being drunk all the time. It took them forever to get rid of him because he was tenured. Then Professor got fired for sleeping with his students. Then there were 3 guys, A, B, and C. A would come in the morning, clock out C, and clock himself in, and then leave 10 minutes later. Guy B came in the afternoon, clocked out Guy A, clocked himself in, and would leave 10 minutes later. Guy C would come in at night to clock himself in, clock B out, and leave 10 minutes later. They did that 7 days a week. Then engineer claimed ton of overtime but never came to work. She was discovered by an entry-level tech recently promoted from the floor, who was sent to her for training on Monday. By Wednesday, he reported he couldn't find her on Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday. Then there's people who should have been fired but never were. There was the supervisor who slept with the assembly worker. The worker sued the company, claimed the supervisor used his position of power to get her to sleep with them, and won money. After that, he slept with another assembly worker. The company got sued again for the same thing and had to pay money. The guy is still there. Then a guy who kept coming to work hanged over and one Monday threw up in a cooling liquid of a CNC machine that was shared between 4 job stations. The other 3 guys weren't happy. Then a guy who was working as an engineer without an engineering degree who balanced automotive assembly line in a way where it was impossible to build anything because he did such a poor job, which caused months of delay. And a guy who never did anything. He came to work, drank huge bottles of pop every day, and never completed his assigned work. Next story. I will preface this by saying I'm not a manager and that this individual wasn't fired, but this is probably the craziest work story I have, so I'm rolling with it. I work for a very large Fortune 500 company in tech. 2 employees, a manager, and our director at the time were all expecting kids around the same time, so our office threw a baby shower for them. Probably 50 to 60 people attended, including our senior director. We were in this large conference room. This whole thing was impressively catered. They each got diaper cakes, and it was an impressive event for a work baby shower. One of the adjacent teams we work with closely from another office also made a congratulatory video. A lot of effort put into this. Senior director then leaves the room, and one of the managers that reports to the director having a baby announces he has something for all of us to watch. He airplays his phone to the big screen, and the first thing to pop up is a video of a woman with her breasts out, wearing assless leather pants, bent over a backless wooden bar stool, being effed from behind by a dude in leather. Room goes dead quiet for a solid 5 to 10 seconds trying to confirm with their brain what their eyes were seeing. Meanwhile, this guy scrambles to get this hardcore adult content off the projector. The room finally erupts in laughter, and that pretty much ended the event. Not only was he not fired though, but years later he was promoted. Super talented guy, but I still can't believe he wasn't fired/didn't resign. Next story. Okay, so I've got two. One was a supervisor that got busted in a police sting operation involving meeting up with minors at a park via a Craigslist ad. The other was this guy that left work one night and chainsawed a hole in his pregnant ex-girlfriend's apartment door and started shooting. The baby and the baby's dad died. The ex-girlfriend lived though. Next story. Bank. One guy managed the dormant accounts. Incredibly nice guy, everyone loved him, had been there for years. One day, after an audit, it was discovered that he'd been embezzling money from the dormant accounts for quite some time. Turns out he'd gotten himself into debt he couldn't climb out of, and that was his only solution. Not only did he get fired, he went to prison. Next story. So, not a manager, but I worked at a university in the department that handles all of the aspects of internal construction, maintenance, and moving. One of our fellow drivers got caught self-pleasuring in a company truck. Then worked at a restaurant where my coworker was addicted to Klonopin and was found passed out in the bathroom. And I worked at a supermarket chain, and a new store was being opened up. They pulled employees from multiple stores to go assist in its grand opening and training of new employees. One of the managers and an employee, who was a friend prior to me working there, got caught logging hours for each other in the system when they weren't there. Something to the tune of a full month's pay. Next story. When I was a paralegal manager, I had to fire a guy for self-pleasuring at his desk. We had high cubicles and he was in the back of the office. Well, we could hear the sounds. He was trying to do it under his coat, but it wasn't working. I had to fire him, and we had to get the two biggest guys from the office to carry him out as he screamed death threats at us. For 3 months, he waited outside of our building every day and just stared at people as they left the building. The cops said they couldn't do anything about it unless he entered the building. Well, one of the employees complained to her boyfriend, and the boyfriend beat him up and he never came back. So, I'm never one to encourage violence in these videos, but having read so many of these stories, every now and then there's a point where violence takes place and I'm like, yeah, that's fine. I'm okay with that. Anyway, next story. So, I don't know if worse means dumb or bad, but either way, this is a question for me. They get worse as you go down. For context, because of where I work, all of these acts and crimes were committed by teenagers, usually 16 or older. First, stole a pizza and when asked what she was doing, replied with, "I'm stealing." Then was on track for a minor leadership role when it was discovered that he'd been stealing ice cream products all summer. The description of the thief was very specific, and this guy wore the same bright pink hoodie with a giant rose on it every day. Naturally, the hoodie was included in the description. The guy insisted that the girl who reported the thief had him confused with an identical employee who wore the same hoodie. Then sold other employees already used employee tickets to guests and lied about it to the general manager. Then stole the iPhone of a born and bred New Orleans guy 3 times his size off the desk of the HR manager. He then refused to give the phone back when the guy he stole from and his big brother knocked on his door, tracking him down with Find My iPhone. Then my assistant manager hooked up with a teenage employee. The assistant manager was pretty young himself, probably 18. The girl was really into him and had been going for him, but when it didn't work out, she got upset. Her parents noticed and called us. We had to fire both employees. Then threw a makeshift shrapnel bomb at another employee who put her arm up to block it. The bomb, which was a sealed metal water bottle with dry ice that had been inside for hours, exploded on contact with her arm, ripping it open and hitting another employee in the head. The bomb was accidentally created by another employee, dry ice and metal water bottle, and finally stole a car under the truly mistaken impression that he was borrowing it and allowed to do so. He took another employee in said car to go get food, with himself driving, despite the fact that he had no license or permit. He thought a school ID would suffice. He then went about 60 down a 30, swerved from one ditch to the other, and totaled the car in the ditch outside the place of employment. Next story. When I ran a retail store once, I had an employee steal money from the safe. I got a call from one of my assistant managers close to closing time that the safe was short money. I drove to the store and verified the safe was short and figured out what happened within 10 minutes. The employee took a broom and moved where the security camera was pointing. To make sure it was no longer pointing at the safe, they stepped in front of the safe. Unfortunately for them, I could still see their legs on the camera and they were wearing shorts. This happened in the winter in Michigan. Only one employee wore shorts to work at that time. Next story. Had one of my very well-liked and hard workers leaving the state. He'd done everything he needed to do with HR, 2-week notice, started returning issued items. On his last day, a store manager trainee got a bug up his ass because this guy didn't have an issued item with him. Dude explained the above, today is my last day, etc. Manager trainee, though, didn't want to hear it at all. Then my guy gets the "F this crap, I'm out" look and jumped on a forklift and drove it across the parking lot to the Taco Bell drive-thru and bought a last meal. Parked in the middle of the parking lot and ate his burritos. Manager trainee lost his mind. My dude just smirked and tossed his company-owed stuff at his feet as he drove by, parked the forklift, and clocked out. Still makes me smile to this day. Next story. Woman owned the hibachi place next to the grocery store I worked in. She set her purse with the neighbor's deposit down in the bagging area of the checkout and left. My employee, in full view of 5 cameras in that area that are very noticeable, saw the purse, looked inside, gave a big smile, picked it up, and left on the bus. Hibachi owner comes in 10 minutes later, freaking out. We run back to the cameras, see what happened, give info to the cops. Cops go to her house. She throws the door open for them to see the purse sitting on the TV stand and her husband packaging Coke at the kitchen table. Next story. Had a guy working for me who was a recovering alcoholic. One of the other employees went to Cuba and brought him back a Mickey of Cuban rum without knowing how bad it was. The guy drank it all in the bathroom before collapsing and nearly pulling down all of the fixtures. I then made sure he got home and I gave him an ultimatum though. Resign and use us as a reference or get fired with cause. He chose the former. The guy lived under a bridge for a while after that before settling in with his father in another province. I'm still his reference for employment. Next story. Pales in comparison to many stories here, but I figured I'd share. I brought in a contractor who was super easy to get a foot in the door at the company I worked in. Due to company policy about this team, we were only hiring in-state. It was the first thing I brought up in the interview. It was reiterated by his contract firm multiple times. Day 2, we hop on a Zoom call. The guy dials in with a tropical beach in the background, not a fake background. And I say, "Hey, where are you?" "Costa Rica, man. Just got here last night. It's gorgeous." "When are you coming back to the States?" "I rented this place for a month, so probably after that. But I might hit up Portugal to see a buddy for a few weeks first." "Okay, well, you were told multiple times that you were required to work within the United States, so you're fired. I'm going to have your account deactivated immediately. Turn in your laptop with your firm when you get back to the US." "But my permanent address is still there." And yeah, I just couldn't believe it. Next story. He had sex with a customer in the dressing room, and then he came out and told me he'd been fooling around, and then he just left. He wasn't fired. Later on, he tried to file for unemployment because he said no one told him he wasn't allowed to do it. The only thing that kept us from having to pay his unemployment was the fact that I didn't fire him. He left of his own accord. Next story. One of my former chefs got drunk and probably high on shift, smashed a door, tried to fight the GM, left on his bicycle but fell off of it on the driveway, which no one knew. I came to work not knowing there was an issue the night before to the guy's stuff all over the driveway. Tobacco, papers, filters, a grinder, alcohol bottles smashed, his underwear, and a few other bits. I clean it up all on my own. He's not there yet, so I start to prep breakfast, and I ask what the F happened the night before when I find the door. He finally comes in late at 7:30, bleeding all over my kitchen from an open wound in his leg, and he's wearing shorts. I fire him for gross misconduct. This isn't even really all the stupid part. The guy, so off his face on whatever substances he's been on, proceeds to forget that I fired him and comes into work the next day. I'm in effing disbelief when he comes in, and I have to fire him for the second morning in a row. Next story. This one bartender called in to see if her bartender buddy that night wanted to swap in times/cut times. She was asking for him to close for her so she could leave early as she was sick. We expected a slow night, so he told her just to stay home. All good, he's got it covered. We then watched her go into the bar across the parking lot in her work shirt. One of our crew was off shift but hanging out. He ran over to see what was up. Chica acted like nothing was wrong, ordered him a shot, and did one with him. This was not her first offense. She was 23. Nobody likes you when you're 23. Next story. Had a barista at a college campus coffee shop where we were having issues with. I was trying to reach him via phone, no answer, so the director went over to check on him. He gets over there. There's a few students standing around with a mix of horror and amusement on their faces. Guy is missing, but his phone is sitting on the counter, blaring hardcore gay adult content at max volume. Turns out while no one was in the shop, he decided to view some adult material, shut himself in the storage room to rub one out, and in his haste left his phone on the counter. Director calls me up and says, "You're never going to believe this." He was union, and they tried to fight to get his job back by claiming sex addiction and asking the company to pay for him to go to rehab. They declined. Next story. I once had an employee complain about how they thought they were shorted a raise from a few months earlier, so I had the company look into it. They found out that it was a bit of a gray area for a few employees. They were hired right before the raise was issued, but the company decided to go ahead and give them all the raise immediately, as well as back pay them from the date the raise would have been issued. When I informed the employee of this via text message, they didn't show up for their scheduled shift and were going on vacation for 2 weeks after that day. They proceeded to blow up my phone with message after message of some pretty threatening stuff. Threatening lawsuits for wage thefts, lying to them, among other things. Person basically went absolutely nuts for the entire 2 weeks of their vacation. I never responded to a single message. I just let them rant. Now, I always have the schedules posted 3 weeks out, so when they called while I was out of the office, an employee told them when they worked next. Helpful employee had customers to deal with, so told them to wait a second. An angry employee got rude, so they hung up on the phone. Angry employee called back, and helpful employee told them when they worked next, but said it quickly. But hateful said they needed to write it down, so tell them again. When they get a pencil and paper, helpful employee showed great patience and did as they asked. Disgruntled employee then continued to text hateful things to me for the next week leading up to their return. Come said return date, and my boss and I were there waiting, just in case something got nasty. When they showed up, they just ranted about how they were stolen from and how they were going to sue us. It eventually led to them flipping me off in the office when I called them about their wrongful accusations. They were suspended at that point and told not to return until notified. 2 days later, they were back in the store, demanding a bunch of disposable vapes they said that they had there. They must have been thrown away months ago because I could never find them. They thought I was lying, so they called the cops on me. Cops came and I explained the situation to them. They told the employee to leave, so they eventually left. This then turned into them refusing to come back for a disciplinary write-up. They said they didn't want to get arrested since we already called the cops on them once before. I reminded them that it was them who called the cops, but they said I was lying again. They insisted and instead tried to do the discussion on the phone, but they refused to listen to the write-up. At that point, we considered them a voluntary quit and washed our hands of them. Last I heard, they were threatening to sue the police as well. Kinda weird how they kept saying they had a lawyer telling them to do all of this, and yet we never spoke to or saw said lawyer. Also, this was all at a convenience store, not some big-time high-paying job. Next story. No longer a manager, but I used to be a GM at a small shop in my college town. Immediately let a guy go that sent a text message implying disgusting things with a hairbrush to one of our underage employees, who was very upset by it and no longer felt safe coming to work. My boss told me I needed to calm down and we shouldn't rush to let someone go because they're flirting, and told the dude he wasn't fired. Well, the girl quit and the business failed not even 2 weeks later. I was not sad to say goodbye to that place. Next story. My husband used to be the GM of a Wingstop. He had hired a new employee. They were a trans man, not a big deal, but it's relevant to the story. Anyway, when setting up their info in the system, their ID reflected their dead name, and husband was sure to advise that they need to provide their legal name on documentation for tax reasons and as to not cause any payroll discrepancies. He also assured him no one would know or refer to them by their dead name. It was strictly legality business. Employee filled out the paperwork using updated name anyway and assures husband that he had the legal paperwork with a legal name change but just needed to go to the DMV. So employee starts working and all is well. Then payday rolls around and husband happened to be off that day, and this employee started blowing up his phone. Apparently, they could not cash their check. Turns out they lied about the legal standing of the name change process. They start getting erratic and demanding something to be done immediately and blaming my husband as if he deviously did this on purpose. My husband then reminded them of their prior conversation they had and told them when he went into work the next day, he would be happy to update the system and a new check would need to be issued. This did not satisfy the employee, and they started berating and physically threatening my husband and others at the store if he didn't seemingly wave a magic wand and fix everything immediately. This was also at like 5 to 6 p.m. But the threats got so unhinged that my husband immediately fired them. hung up, and called his boss and told him what's up. The employee was also banned from coming to the store or police would be called. As for the check, the employee would now have to wait to receive the check by mail, which would take several days longer than waiting until the next day as originally expected. Husband had a hammer below the cash register to protect him and the store in the event they were going to make good on their threats. But thankfully, nothing happened. Crazy, right? Edit, just wanted to clarify that this is not a trans generalizing or bashing post. Unhinged folks can come in all forms. Next story. I had an employee use a company gas card on his personal car. Purposes for company vehicles only. Got caught using his gas card on a Sunday night at 12 a.m. in the hood. Not where he would be working, but right near his house, and not the time he would be working. And he admitted to it. I asked him if it had happened previously. He said no, got a warning letter. 2 days later, I got the report that he did it 2 previous times. Lost his job the next day. If he had just told me the truth, he wouldn't have lost his job. And I asked him 3 times, what makes you think if you got caught the most recent time, you wouldn't get caught the previous times? Next story. 2018, not manager but former regional manager here, showed up to do an unannounced cash audit on one of my retail stores, only to find all the petty cash in the safe missing. Turns out, store manager just so happened to choose that day to borrow the money to buy nose candy for the first time, he swore, and I showed up at the wrong time before he could pay it back to the safe. The problem was, I showed up because I had remote DVR access, and I had footage of him doing it previously and then taking the ASM into the woman's restroom for an hour, while the store was locked up in the middle of the day. Turns out, people call customer service when your national brand cellular telephone retail location is supposed to be open on a Tuesday afternoon, and it's not. Edit. I totally forgot the best part. Of course, the dude was married with kids at home, and if I recall correctly, he had another one on the way. Okay, folks, let's play around here. Which phone carrier location do you think it was? T-Mobile, Verizon, AT&T? I'm going to be honest. I think it was Cricket. I think they were Cricket and cucking. Cricket and cocking? Cricket and chill? I don't know. We'll think of something later, but I think it was Cricket Mobile employees doing the dirty closing the store. Tell me what you think. Next story. So, our company regularly visits people's homes, as often as once a month. Many years ago, a dude has a key to enter a specific house to get their job done each month. Apparently, they keep sexy VHS tapes in the house and he sits down to watch one in the living room. Unfortunately, he is surprised to find out that the 13-year-old daughter is homesick for the day when she came out and saw him doing his thing. I guess he technically wasn't fired since he just came to the office and dropped off his uniform and keys and walked home without talking to anyone. Almost everyone in the small town the customer lived in canceled within a few months. Next story. Worked at a hotel. One of the overnight front desk agents had to evict some guests for partying. After he had them removed, he realized that he had never finalized their check-in, and he didn't have any information for the people in the room. Very apologetic. Accidents happen, and good overnight help is hard to find. I wanted to get at least a picture of the people he evicted. I did some research on the key used to access the room so I could check the camera on the time that they checked in. Well, turns out the overnight front desk guy made the key for himself. He threw the party and there was no guest kicked out. Next story. So I currently manage software engineers. If you've ever worked with engineers, they can be a different breed. I haven't necessarily had a bad experience with one, but have definitely met some characters. So I hired a guy. He killed the interview. It was virtual. Resume was great, had excellent references. My team alternates between 3 to 2 and 2 to 3 in office days, and this guy had worked remote since 2011, and in his first day, it effing showed. Before I even got into my office, I had 4 complaints about this guy's body odor. I wasn't really sure what to think until I got there and shook his hand. I damn near fainted. I've never smelled body odor like that in my entire life. I immediately asked him to come outside with me because I didn't want him stinking up the office. I asked him what was going on, if he had a medical condition I needed to be aware of. He had no idea what I was talking about. So I told him point blank, he smelled like a bomb hit a diaper. He was shocked and couldn't believe it. I asked him to take care of it and gave him the rest of the week to work from home to get it taken care of. So then a week goes by. He comes into the office and immediate complaints from people again. One colleague threatened to walk out. I asked the guy again what the deal was, and he told me, "Well, I sprayed Febreze on myself before I walked in." My jaw almost dropped. Apparently, this guy hasn't showered in literal years and just washes himself with water from his sink once a week. He also smokes cigarettes and apparently only eats one meal a day and drinks IPAs for dinner. I asked him again to take care of this or there would be a conversation with HR. Well, conversations with HR happened, as you probably guessed. He was eventually terminated, but one thing he told HR was that he wasn't sure how to properly shower and he asked for guidance. Next story. I manage a cheese department in a gourmet grocery store that also serves prepared foods. The employee in question was already a problem. An elderly lady came up looking for a fork for her lunch, and this guy said, "Sorry, I'm a cheesemonger, not a forkmonger," and turned away immediately. She was extremely upset, and we were out of disposable forks, so we ended up giving her a metal fork from the restaurant upstairs. Unreal behavior. We're known for good customer service, and it was crazy to see an employee act like that right in front of me, and then joke about it afterwards. Next story. My dad/uncle's small family remodeling company where I also worked at. New hire says he'll let us use some tools for a job we're doing. Proudly says he stole them from his last employer. Later on, while driving the company truck, hops out and gets into a fight with a teenager right out in front of the high school that I attended and brags about kicking this guy's ass. It was in the paper the next day as a mini riot. The guy was an adult just out of the army. Didn't last the week. Next story. When we brought up minor issues to talk to the employee about, they sicked their mom on us during their break. Screaming, cursing, threats of violence and lawsuits. That person was in their mid to late 20s, not a kid. We told them to go ahead and not bother clocking back in from the break. The organization offered at-will employment and all employees knew this. It was a summer camp with most employees ranging from 18 to 28, though there were some older employees. We anticipated that this might be an issue with the younger employees, but none older than 20. Next story. Lots to choose from, but this was one of the first that I became aware of. Way back when the internet was being introduced as a business tool, and prior to any formal policies being established, there was a guy in a private office who discovered that the internet was full of adult content. And not only did he like viewing it, but he had a habit of printing it to his adjacent desktop printer. All is good until his printer broke and tech services took it away for repair and redirected his print jobs to the central printer located next to reception. So the next day, while browsing adult content, he finds something he likes and hits the print button. But instead of the familiar whirring of the printer starting up, he realizes his mistake. He then attempts to casually walk up to reception to retrieve the printout, only to discover nothing in the tray. Instead, one of the secretaries is holding the printout, asking him if he is looking for something. He was fired the next day. Thing was, there was no policy in place at the time of his indiscretion. If he fought the dismissal chances, he probably would have won. Next story. So it was a grease trap day at the salad joint. If you don't know, the dishwashing sink was set up to collect grease and oils so they don't go into the water system. Eventually, this trap needs to have its collection dumped. It's absolutely one of the most disgusting and vile-smelling things you will ever experience. I had a new guy that had been there for around 2 weeks, and we needed to clean the grease trap and transport the vicious liquid to the grease disposal spot. We got it all in a few 5-gallon buckets filled to the brim. He grabbed 2 at once, and on his way out of the kitchen and into the dining lobby, he dropped them. Both of them. That liquid went absolutely everywhere, running back into the kitchen, under tables, seeping into the baseboards and walls. I was absolutely astounded by the mess. This wasn't just something you could mop up. It was gallons of the most foul, slippery substance imaginable. The smell was something like dead raccoons and leech farts. Totally atrocious. And I said, "Dude, we have to figure out how to clean this up." And he said, "Okay, I'll be right back." He didn't come back. I waited around 15 minutes, called him, and left a voicemail. "You're fired." I spent a few hours using various cooking sheets to scrape it up and dispose of it. I then mopped the remainder of the floor with whatever chemicals I could find. Pretty sure I took the finish off the floor. My shoes and pants were completely stinky and ruined, and I had to take the bus home, which took longer than an hour. The owner gave me $100 the next day, though. We decided to hire professionals from that point on. But funnily enough, the guy that came and collected it accidentally spilled the thing in his effing car. That place was cursed. Next story. So I'm a manager for a cardboard company. 3 months ago, an employee got fired when he rushed into the office and was about to hit another employee. The reason, as it turns out, was because the second employee had kissed the first employee's fiance a while back. Luckily, a third employee who volunteers as sheriff had his pepper spray on hand. He took down the first employee with the pepper spray. Crisis averted. Needless to say, we fired the belligerent employee. For a good while after, the female employees in the office kept asking about how the volunteer sheriff took down the first employee. Next story. Asked them about their skill set and experience when they were transferred to me, as I was told they were underperforming. Asked specifically about things they said they could do on their resume and from their interview, not mentioning why I was asking. They plainly stated that they had no experience in any of those things. Ended up letting them go within the week. My guess is they had someone write their resume for them and studied common interview questions, but no idea how they even got through the interview stage. Pretty sure the person who interviewed them got let go eventually too, though. Next story. Had a guy show up drunk to work. We all knew it, but he was a young kid and we decided to give him a pass. The dude drives a delivery truck. Told him to go home, sleep it off, and come back the next day. No punishment, just a day off. He insisted he wasn't drunk and was good. Again, try to explain no trouble, just go home and come back tomorrow. But he wouldn't go. Gave him the choice, either go home or take a breathalyzer. If he didn't blow straight zeros, he would be fired. Opted for the breathalyzer because he knew he wasn't drunk. Got a cop to come down and give him a breathalyzer? Well, he blew a .05 and was fired on the spot and got the day off anyway. Next story. Hired a Romanian guy. After 4 weeks of him shadowing someone, he starts working on his own, and his work was dog crap. After a week, I take him into the office with another manager to have a chat and see if he understands what he's meant to be doing, if he needs more training, if he feels he needs a couple of more weeks of shadowing, etc. And throughout the thing, he says no. I ask him if he's certain. He says yes. So I bring up the previous week's work and tell him he's not in trouble, not to worry as he's new, but it wasn't up to standard. So if he thinks he needs more training, just say so and we can sort it out. But he says no. Another week passes, work isn't good enough. So I take him in again and go through the same process of asking if he needs any help understanding what he needed to do. Again, he insists not. So I said to him, if I don't see an improvement, I'll have to go down the performance management process as his work isn't up to standard, despite him insisting that he knows what he's doing. And he starts kicking off, shouting and swearing, called me and the other manager an idiot. We both looked at each other like, what the hell? We've given you plenty of opportunities to say you need more training. And he wouldn't calm down. So I said to him, go home, stay home, and he'll receive a letter in the next couple of days to invite him to a disciplinary meeting because it's unacceptable. And then he swung a punch at me. We took that as his resignation, and he never came back. Next story. Used to work for a large retailer that had all of its employees take an annual anonymous job satisfaction survey on the computer. Although the survey was supposed to be tamper-proof, the store manager somehow was able to change the results before sending them to corporate headquarters. He would have been able to get away with it too, except for the fact that he changed the results too much. As altered, the survey showed that every employee in the store was 100% satisfied with their job. Headquarters management immediately saw that this was completely impossible, launched an investigation, and the store manager was soon an ex-manager. Next story. My stupid sister lied her way up to get an engineering manager job at a boat manufacturer company. She has absolutely no education higher than a GED/high school diploma. However, boat company decides to give her a company credit card upon hiring and a bunch of projects for her and her team to work on. She has no idea how to do the projects because she is not an engineer, has no idea how to manage a team as she's never managed people before. She doesn't show up to any project meetings, so the team she was hired to lead never knew what to do. Time goes on and the employees that are left hung up with no leadership on what to do start complaining. Then the boat company finally tracks her down, and it turns out she was traveling around the United States sightseeing and spending money at high-end restaurants. She was fired, rightfully so. Not sure if she had to pay anything back or was charged with anything, but I sure hope she was. Wow, so this woman not only faked her way up to an engineering job, but falsified her way up to an engineering managing job. I'm impressed, not happy, but impressed. Maybe she slept her way to the top. I don't know. It's a possibility. We've also read stories about incompetent hiring managers, so maybe that's what happened. Who knows? But feel free to let us know in the comments. Have you ever had to fire an employee? Have you ever had to punch an employee in the face? We've all been there a few times. I get it, guys, okay? No judgments here. But anyway, folks, this is the end of the video. Thank you all so much for watching. Have a really good day, and bye-bye.